Neanderthals were strong, physically impressive humans. But how intelligent were they compared to us? We'll never know for sure because Neanderthal brains don't fossilize. But some Neanderthal skulls do survive, and they've been measured and analyzed in minute detail.
So the first thing that strikes you when you see a Neanderthal skull are the really big eyebrows, doubly arched, very thick brow ridges, very massive face with a huge nasal opening, and when you turn it to the side, you can see a very low and elongated brain case. And these differences are really obvious, especially if you compare it to a modern human skull, like this one, which is an early modern European skull from Cro-Magnon. Very high, rounded brain case, a much smaller facial skeleton, and no real brow ridges to speak of, especially when compared to the Neanderthal here.
For a long time, it was assumed that the low brain case of the Neanderthal must contain a smaller brain. But the opposite is true. Neanderthal brains were bigger than ours, 10% bigger.
The average brain size for Neanderthals is 1,500 cubic centimeters. This compares to average for modern humans as a whole, 1,350. So, of course, the cliche that a Neanderthal is kind of a stupid individual is certainly not true. Now, whether that means that it's the same kind of intelligence as our own or the same kind of cognition as our own, that's a different matter.
The traditional view among anthropologists is that despite their big brains, Neanderthals crucially lacked the ability to think in symbols, to be creative.
You know, I don't want to say that Neanderthals were not smart. I think they were about as intuitively smart as it's possible for an organism to be. I just don't think that the evidence indicates that they were symbolic in the same way that we are, and certainly in the same way that the modern humans who entered their territory were.
Almost everywhere modern humans lived, they left behind evidence of a creative, symbolic mind. Minerals used as face paint, jewelry made from animal teeth, handprints on rock walls. It's long been thought that Neanderthals did none of these things. One of the most dramatic examples of our ancestors' creativity is to be found in the caves of southern France. Extraordinary paintings deep underground, done by modern humans as they settled in Europe. Although Neanderthals had lived in the same region for thousands of years, they didn't leave behind a single example of cave art. But at the Neanderthal site of Puy-de-Laz in the Dordogne, archaeologists have found something intriguing. This cave was scattered with hundreds of pieces of manganese dioxide, and Marie Seresi thinks she knows what they were used for.
This piece of manganese dioxide looks like a piece of stone. But if you look at it closer, you will soon notice that here, for example, it's all irregular, all bumpy. But if we turn it and we look at it from here, you will see that there is a straight edge. And if you look at that edge under the microscope, you will see that there is some traces of use.
Archaeologists know one use for manganese dioxide, as a black decorative pigment.
We can clearly imagine a group of Neanderthals preparing themselves for the hunt, decorating themselves, decorating somebody else on the face. It could have been to identify themselves, or it could have been some sort of camouflage during the hunt. It's a clear evidence of complex behavior, which is similar to the behavior of modern humans when they entered Europe.
For scientists like Marie Seresi, the gulf between Neanderthals and modern humans is shrinking. The two species seem so similar in the way they thought and behaved, sometimes it's hard to distinguish them by the artifacts they left behind. Certainly, when it came to making stone tools, Neanderthals were the equals of modern humans.
This is one of the stone tools we found here. It's called the biface. It's a multi-purpose tool which was used by Neanderthals to do the butchery, because you have here a tip which is very useful to cut the meat and go inside the animal.
A biface in the hands of a modern butcher. How does it compare to his steel knives?
Alors, quand je fais ça avec un couteau, c'est la partie que j'aime le moins. Enfin, c'est la partie la plus difficile, je suppose que ça va être pareil. Hein. Mais ceci dit, ça marche très très bien.
For Neanderthals to have made elaborate tools like this would have required a certain type of mind, the ability to think ahead, to imagine an outcome.
Each time you're gonna hit the rock, you need to think about that hit, but you also need to plan for the future ones. And you have to plan several hits in advance. This is showing that Neanderthals were as smart, at least when we are talking about making those stone tools, as modern humans.
The more we understand about the behavior of Neanderthals, the more resourceful, intelligent, human they seem to be. And now even the charge of cannibalism is being reconsidered. Some scientists believe that although they were cutting the bones of their dead, it may have been for reasons other than sheer hunger. They may have had more noble motives.
This skull is very interesting because it has a series of cuts coming across the forehead here, very regular in an area where you don't have any meat to be removed. So they seem to have been cutting this head to, in various ways, prepare, perhaps, the skull for later use in some kind of a funerary ritual. It's perhaps some indication of some sort of symbolic behavior, some much more modern kind of behavior by these Neanderthals.
Any evidence that Neanderthals were performing rituals is highly significant. It suggests they had a mind that conceived of an afterlife, capable of abstract thought, a mind like ours. For much of the last 100 years, we've cast the Neanderthals as primitive subhumans, quite unrelated to us. But if they were really so similar in the way they thought and behaved, where should they sit in the human family tree? Were they our distant cousins or our forefathers? The only way to know for sure is to examine our DNA.